My husband walked into my own birthday party with another woman on his arm. The decorations were up, the cake was on the table. My mother was in the kitchen. My college roommate was laughing in the corner, and Trent walked through the front door, looked around the room full of people who loved me, and smiled. "This is Cassidy. Hope that's okay, babe." She didn't have anywhere to be tonight. Someone's fork hit a plate. My mother made a sound I had never heard her make before. The room went the kind of silent that has weight to it, the kind you can feel pressing against your chest. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I didn't say a single word that anyone would remember as ugly. I smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a nervous smile. Something quieter than both of those. Something that confused him, I could tell, even from across the room. Because I'd been waiting 6 months for exactly this moment. My name is Daniela Reyes Montoya. I'm 31 years old. And yes, that was my birthday party, and yes, that was my husband, and no, I did not lose my mind. But let me back up. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, in a household that never had extra. My parents ran a small alterations and tailoring shop on the east side, a real shop. The kind where people brought their grandmother's wedding dress or their son's interview suit and trusted you with it completely. I grew up in the back of that shop, threading needles by age 7, learning that careful hands and patient attention were worth more than speed. My parents didn't have degrees, but they had precision, and they passed that to me. I was the first in my family to finish a 4-year degree, communications and digital media. I walked across that stage and my mother cried so hard she had to sit down. After college, I took a junior content coordinator job at a mid-sized marketing agency. Modest salary, long hours, shared desk. I wasn't the flashiest person in that building, not even close. But I was the one who stayed until 7 when everyone else left at 5. I was the one who read the data twice and asked the question no one wanted to ask in the meeting. I built a quiet reputation, the kind that doesn't get you invited to every happy hour but does get you trusted with the accounts that actually matter. I met Trent Calloway at a friend's cookout when I was 27. He was charming in that immediate, effortless way. The kind of man who remembers your name and your drink order after one conversation. It makes you feel like you're the most interesting person he's ever talked to. I fell hard. Looking back, I understand why. He was warm and confident and funny. And he made every room feel like a better version of itself just by walking in. We got married 2 years later. Small ceremony. His parents flew in from Charlotte. My whole extended family came. It was a good day. I believed in it completely. What I didn't fully see until much later was that Trent also needed something more than love. He needed an audience. He needed to be the most impressive person in any room he occupied. For a while, I fit perfectly beside him. I was ambitious but quiet about it, successful but not in any way that outshone him. We made sense as a unit, but when I started growing, when I started outpacing the version of myself he had married, something in him shifted. Slowly enough that I almost missed it. Almost. I wasn't rich. I wasn't flashy. I didn't have a powerful last name or a trust fund or a family that threw their weight around, but I had something Trent never once gave me credit for, and that was about to change everything. I want to tell you exactly how I got to that birthday party, because the ending doesn't make sense without the beginning. If you grew up being underestimated by your family, by a partner, by a boss, by anyone who looked at you and made a quiet decision about your ceiling, then you already know the feeling I'm describing. The one where you work twice as hard and still get treated like you're lucky just to be included, where you bring your best to the table and someone else takes credit for the warmth in the room. I've been that person. I spent a long time thinking that if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, made myself easier to be around, eventually, I'd be recognized for what I actually was. It doesn't always work that way. If that sounds familiar, stick with me. I share stories like this because I know someone out there needs to hear that it doesn't stay that way. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And I want to ask you something. Have you ever smiled through something that was breaking you? Because you knew your time was coming? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one and click like. It tells me you're still with me. Now, 3 months before the birthday party, it was a Wednesday. I'd left work at lunch because I wasn't feeling well. Low-grade headache, that kind of bone-tired that hits when your body finally tells you to stop. Our apartment was quiet when I unlocked the door. But not empty. I could hear Trent in the kitchen, his voice, that specific laugh, the relaxed one, the one he used when he was completely comfortable. He didn't hear me come in. I stood just inside the hallway and heard him say, "No, she doesn't suspect anything." Daniela's too focused on her little career stuff to pay attention. That's just how she is. A pause. Yeah, I'll figure out the party situation, just don't worry about it. I froze. I stood there in my coat, keys still in my hand, and I made myself breathe. He turned and saw me. The silence between us lasted maybe 4 seconds. It felt much longer. He didn't apologize. He didn't panic. He hung up slowly, deliberately, and said, with almost impressive steadiness, "That wasn't what it sounded like." I asked him, very calmly, "Who were you talking to?" He gave me a vague half answer. "A friend." Then, "You're being paranoid." And then, before I could follow up, he pivoted entirely and asked what I wanted for dinner. Like we were switching channels. I didn't cry that night. I didn't push the conversation. Instead, something in me quietly reorganized. I started paying attention in a way I never had before. And once I started, I couldn't stop. Trent took his phone to the bathroom every single time it buzzed after 9 p.m. He worked late on the exact evenings I had plans of my own. When new charges appeared on the joint account, his explanations were always a little too smooth. Detailed enough to seem credible, but rehearsed in a way that real explanations aren't. 2 months before the party, I started planning my own birthday gathering. I didn't ask Trent to help. I booked the space in our open-plan living area, ordered the cake myself, sent out the invitations myself. I told Trent the date. He said, "Sounds fun. I'll be there." He said it the way you confirm a dentist appointment. Perfectly pleasant, completely absent. But here's the thing I haven't told you yet. In the middle of all this quiet watching, I found something. We had a joint family tablet, an old one we'd bought the first year of the marriage, never really used after the first 6 months. It had been sitting in the hall closet charging once a week out of habit. I opened it one evening while Trent was out just to check something, and I found a shared cloud storage folder I'd never seen before. Trent must have forgotten it was there. Inside, months of receipts, photos, messages, and one document that stopped my breath completely. I didn't confront him. I didn't delete a single file. I screenshotted everything onto a personal drive and closed the folder exactly as I'd found it. Every photo, every message, every receipt, exact order, untouched. I told no one. Not yet. Most people would have exploded right then. I understand that. I wanted to. There's a version of that night where I throw the tablet across the room and say every true thing at maximum volume. But something steadier in me said, wait, let him think everything is fine, because the moment he gets comfortable enough to bring her to my birthday party, that's when I make my move. The first sign that something had gone seriously wrong between us, beyond the phone calls, beyond the late nights, was money. We had a shared savings account. 3 years of careful deposits. It was supposed to be our down payment, the house we'd talked about, the neighborhood we'd picked out together. The backyard Trent kept mentioning whenever we drove past places with good schools. I logged in one afternoon to confirm a transfer, and the number I saw was not the number I expected, significantly not. I asked Trent about it that evening. Calm, direct, what happened to the savings? He waved his hand like I'd asked about the weather. I moved some things around. It's a financial strategy, Danny. You wouldn't really get it, it's complicated. I pushed. And he shifted into something colder under the warmth. Look, I handle the money side of things. That's always been our arrangement. Can you just trust me? I stopped talking about it. But the next morning, I opened a separate personal account and quietly redirected my direct deposits. He was right that I hadn't been paying close enough attention to the money. That was genuinely on me. But you wouldn't get it was the last time Trent Calloway ever talked down to me about anything. The second time it happened in public, which is somehow harder to shake. Trent's work colleague hosted a dinner party, one of those carefully arranged evenings where everyone's wearing their most presentable version of themselves. The colleague's wife asked me about my work, genuinely interested, leaning forward the way people do when they actually want to know. Before I could finish my second sentence, Trent cut in, warmly, smoothly, like he was doing me a favor. She does social media stuff, you know, posting, captions, that kind of thing. It keeps her busy. The table laughed lightly, the polite laugh that fills space at dinner parties, and the conversation moved on. I smiled. I let it pass. In the car driving home, I said quietly, "That was dismissive, Trent." He sighed the way he did when he decided I was being sensitive. I was just simplifying it. People's eyes glaze over when you explain it. I didn't respond. I looked out the window at the highway lights. He'd been simplifying me for years, cutting me down to a size that fit better beside him. And I had allowed it because somewhere along the way I had convinced myself that was what love required, making yourself easier to hold. It doesn't. Love doesn't require you to be smaller. I just needed long enough to remember that. The third time, he didn't dismiss me, he turned it around on me entirely. 1 week before the party, I heard the name Cassidy come up in a conversation he thought I wasn't close enough to hear. This time, I didn't stay quiet. I waited until he was off the phone, and I asked him directly, "Are you seeing someone?" He didn't get defensive. He didn't raise his voice. He got soft and hurt, which was actually harder to stand than anger. "Daniela, you've been so stressed lately. I'm genuinely worried about you. Cassidy is a coworker. This is the second time you've accused me of something with zero basis. He told me I'd been emotionally unavailable for months. He suggested, gently, that maybe talking to someone, a therapist, might help me sort through whatever this is. He framed my suspicion as the thing that was damaging us, and he did it so smoothly, so carefully, that for 1 full hour I actually sat with the possibility that I was wrong. Then I went to my personal drive and opened the screenshots. That hour of self-doubt was the last one I gave him. I printed everything that night. And I made a phone call. Here's what I want you to understand about that cloud folder. It wasn't just personal messages. It wasn't just photos of Trent with someone who wasn't me. What I found in that folder crossed a line that had nothing to do with infidelity and everything to do with fraud. There were documents showing that Trent had been taking out personal loans in my name, without my knowledge, without my signature, or with signatures I don't remember giving and don't believe I gave. The money from those loans had been moving in patterns that did not go toward anything we shared or anything I ever agreed to. What they didn't know was that I had already handed everything to someone who knew exactly what to do with it. The phone call I made that night after the gaslighting. I called someone I trusted who recommended an attorney, not a friend's cousin, an actual attorney with a specific kind of expertise. I had 2 confidential consultations before a single-party decoration went up in my living room. By the time I ordered the cake, that attorney had already sent 1 formal document on my behalf to an address I knew very well. I want to tell you something else too. Something Trent had been dismissing for months as my little hobby. I had been running a freelance digital consulting practice on the side, quietly, under a business name that was legally registered that Trent had heard me mention exactly once and immediately forgotten. In the month before my birthday, I landed my first significant retainer client, not life-changing money, but real money, proof that I had built something actual and true entirely on my own. While he told dinner party guests I did captions, he thought I was distracted. He thought I was naive. He had absolutely no idea that while he was making plans to bring her to my party, I was planning the last conversation we'd ever have about money, about our marriage, or about my worth. I set the table. I ordered the cake. I sent out the invitations. And I made sure everyone he cared about impressing would be in that room. I want to tell you about Renata Okafor. I met her 3 years ago at a professional development conference. One of those Saturday events that you almost cancel because you're tired, and then you go, and you meet one person who changes the angle of everything. Renata is a senior strategist, sharp, measured, the kind of woman who has watched people make emotional decisions in high-stakes situations and has learned, carefully, how to help them not do that. She wasn't my attorney. She was something more useful in those early weeks. She was steady when I was not. When I called her the night after the gaslighting, I was not calm. My hands were shaking. I told her what I'd heard, what I'd found, what I'd spent weeks documenting, and she listened all the way through without interrupting. Then she said, "Stop. Don't do anything yet. Tell me everything and then we figure out what you actually have." That steadiness saved me from reacting too early. Because if I had reacted when my hands were shaking, I would have given him time to adjust. Time to move things. Time to prepare. Instead, Renata helped me see the situation for what it was. Not just a betrayal, but a specific set of circumstances that required a specific kind of response. She recommended the attorney. She sat with me through both consultations. She helped me stay quiet long enough to be effective. In the days leading up to the party, she helped me with one more thing. She knew about the freelance business. She had actually been an informal advisor on it from the beginning. She helped me think through how to present my first retainer contract in a way that was factual, not performative. A number is a number. Let it speak. Renata was coming to the birthday party. She was the only person in that room who knew everything. And Trent? In those final days, He was relaxed in a way that would have been almost funny if it hadn't been so revealing. He offered to help with party logistics and did nothing. He bought me a spa voucher and seemed genuinely pleased with himself about it. The afternoon of the party, he texted me, "Can't wait for tonight. It'll be a good night." I read that text 3 times. I smiled each time, not warmly. The focused, forward-facing smile of someone who has already done all the work and is simply waiting for the clock to reach the right hour. I got dressed that evening with unusual care. I chose my outfit deliberately, not to perform, but because I understood what the evening was. I did my makeup slowly. I looked in the mirror for a long moment. I wasn't dressing up for a birthday party. I was dressing for the last scene of a very long story. Trent walked in at 7:14 p.m. I know the exact time because I had been watching the door. He came in with Cassidy just behind him, and the room shifted the way rooms do when something wrong enters them. Not loud, just a change in temperature. My mother grabbed my arm. My best friend from college, standing near the bookshelf, mouthed something I won't repeat here, but understood completely. Trent read the room and performed casual confidence, the version he'd refined over years of walking into spaces and deciding how they should feel about him. Cassidy had a rough week. I told her this was a low-key thing. Hope that's cool. He said it like he was doing the room a small, generous favor. I smiled. I walked toward them both and said warmly and clearly, loud enough for the nearest cluster of guests to hear, "Of course. Everyone's welcome tonight. Can I get you something to drink, Cassidy?" Cassidy looked like she wasn't sure which direction was safe. She said yes. I got her a drink. I moved back into the party. I laughed at someone's story near the window. I refilled 2 glasses. I hugged my aunt when she arrived late. The room didn't know what to do with my calm. Neither did Trent. I could feel him watching me from across the space, trying to locate the scene he had been bracing for. There was no scene. I was simply present, warmer than he deserved, quieter than he expected, and completely in control of every second. About 45 minutes in, I tapped my glass lightly. The room quieted. I thanked everyone for coming. I said what I meant about the people in that room, that they were the people I actually trusted, the ones who had shown up for me in every sense of that phrase. Then I said, "Trent has always believed in keeping things interesting. Tonight is no exception." A few people laughed, thinking it was a playful jab. Trent smiled carefully. Then I introduced Renata. I said she had been one of the most important people in my life over the past year. Renata nodded from her spot near the kitchen. Trent looked at her with polite blankness. He had never heard her name before. I let the moment settle. Then I changed register. Not dramatically, not with volume, just a slight shift in tone that made the room instinctively pay closer attention. I want to share something with everyone here because these are the people I trust most. I've spent the last 3 years building something I never really talked about publicly. I was a little embarrassed, honestly. Trent used to call it my hobby. And took out my phone. I pulled up a screenshot of the retainer contract. The first real one, the one signed and dated, and carrying a number that was real and significant and entirely mine. I didn't wave it around the room. I showed it quietly to the people nearest to me and said the number clearly, once. Just the number. Nothing added. The reaction moved through the room like a current. Trent's face changed, not dramatically, just changed. The easy confidence flickered. He looked at the phone, then at me, and I watched him try to locate where he'd miscalculated. I kept going. Same tone, same unhurried pace. I also want to be honest about something harder. I turned, not with theatrics, not with a trembling voice, just turned and spoke directly. "Trent, I know about the accounts. I know about the loans taken out of my name, and so does my attorney." I said the attorney's name clearly. It was a name that meant something in this city, and I watched a few guests register it. The room was completely still. Trent tried, "Daniela, this is not the place." I said, "You brought Cassidy to my birthday party. You chose the place." 1 beat passed. Maybe 2. Then Renata spoke, not loudly, not performing, just adding one clear fact to the room. "The formal notice was delivered to your office on Thursday. I believe you signed for it." Trent went pale. I had never seen that particular color on his face before. Cassidy had gone so still she seemed to have stopped breathing. She looked like someone who had just realized the room she walked into was not the room she'd been told about. No one shouted, nothing broke. The silence held for a moment that felt much longer than it was. And then I raised my glass. "I'm 31 years old. I worked hard. I built something real. And tonight I'm celebrating that. with every single person in this room who actually showed up for me. Someone started clapping. Then a few more. Then the room. My mother was crying, which she had been doing quietly for several minutes. Trent was still standing near the door. Cassidy was slightly behind him. And the room, all the people he had cared about impressing, every person whose opinion he had cultivated and managed over years, had simply moved on without him. They were looking at me. In the weeks that followed, the legal process moved with the kind of efficiency that only happens when the documentation is airtight. Because I had collected everything before Trent had any reason to start adjusting or hiding it, the fraudulent loans were quickly identified and addressed by the appropriate parties. His financial strategy held up poorly under official examination, which is what tends to happen when a strategy depends entirely on the other person not looking. We separated. It was not painless, separations rarely are, regardless of who was wrong or how clearly, but it moved faster and more cleanly than Trent anticipated. Because I had done my preparation months before it ever occurred to him to do his. Cassidy, it turned out, hadn't known the full picture either. She'd been told what she'd been told and believed it the way most people believe someone they trust. I don't carry anger toward her. She was fooled too. I don't have space in my life for anger at someone who is standing in the same dark room I was, just from a different direction. Trent's standing, the professional reputation he had spent years carefully constructing, the impression he managed so deliberately in every room he entered, quietly eroded. Not overnight, not publicly, but word moves through professional circles the way water moves through everything, slowly, persistently, finding every crack. He didn't lose everything, but he lost the effortless confidence he used to carry into every space, and honestly, that felt like the most precise consequence possible. I moved into a smaller apartment. By choice, not by necessity. Something about scale felt right. A space that was exactly mine. Nothing performed, nothing oversized. I grew the freelance business. Within 8 months of that birthday party, I had 2 retainer clients and a third in active conversation. My mother called me one Sunday, and in Spanish she said, "I always knew you were the strongest one. I just prayed you'd find out too." I've thought about that phone call many times since. I close this the only way I know how. Directly. To you. I spent years making myself smaller so that Trent could feel bigger. I told myself it was compromise. I told myself it was partnership. I told myself that was what love looked like when you're practical about it. It wasn't. Love doesn't ask you to disappear. Real love, the kind worth having, makes room for you to expand, not contract. The moment I stopped disappearing, the moment I let everyone in that room see exactly what was happening and who I actually was, I finally started taking up the space I had always been supposed to occupy. 31 was the best birthday I ever had. If you've ever been with someone who treated your ambitions like they were cute but not serious, who described your work to other people in a way that subtracted from it rather than added, whose support always came with a ceiling just slightly lower than your reach, then you know the particular kind of tired I'm talking about. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It accumulates. Not everyone has a cloud folder full of evidence. Not everyone gets a birthday party with perfect timing and a room full of witnesses. I know that. The dramatic moment is not actually the point. The point is the decision that happened months before the party, when I was sitting alone with a tablet in a quiet apartment, and I chose not to react. I chose to think instead. I chose to build instead of burn. You don't need a perfect moment to stop accepting less than you deserve. You just need to stop waiting for permission to know your own worth. If you've been dismissed by someone who is supposed to be in your corner, a partner, a spouse, anyone who had your trust and spent it carelessly, I want to hear from you. Drop your story in the comments, even just a sentence. You might be the reason someone else feels less alone tonight. And if this story meant something to you, click like to help it reach someone out there who needs to hear it. You might not know who that person is, but they'll know. One more thing before you go, and I mean this. To the people who never make a scene, the ones who hold everything together in public and fall apart quietly, privately, when the door is closed. The ones everyone describes as so strong, like that is a sufficient explanation for why the weight keeps landing on you. Being quiet is not the same as being weak. Waiting for the right moment is not the same as being passive. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone completely underestimate you. And then let everyone watch. If you're new here, I tell stories like this because I believe there is something genuinely important about hearing that other people have been exactly where you are and walked out the other side changed, not broken. Subscribe so you're here for the next one. I promise it's worth your time. Next time, a story about a woman who discovered her entire family had been lying to her for 15 years about something she believed she had earned completely on her own. That one is going to hit differently. You'll want to be here when it drops. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Take care of yourselves. And remember, the people who underestimate you are doing you a favor. They're showing you exactly how much room you have to surprise them. I'll see you next time.